The morning was silent, and the world looked peaceful under the winter sky. Snow covered the streets, and the air felt calm, almost magical. It was Christmas Day, a day when millions of people celebrate joy, kindness, and hope. But very few people truly know the real story behind this day, and even fewer know the real man who inspired the world to believe in generosity and kindness. That man was Saint Nicholas. Long before the modern idea of Santa Claus, long before red costumes and flying reindeer, there was a real person who lived a life filled with kindness, courage, and sacrifice. His story did not begin with gifts or celebrations. It began with struggle, faith, and a promise to help people no matter what the world looked like. A child born in a difficult time. Saint Nicholas was born in a time when the world was very different from today. Life was not easy. There were no modern cities, no advanced technology, and no safe lives for ordinary people. Wars were common, poverty was everywhere, and many families struggled just to survive. But even as a child, Nicholas was different. While other children played and laughed without thinking about others, he noticed the suffering around him. He saw poor families who could not afford food. He saw children who had no warm clothes. He saw parents who had lost hope. And something inside him changed. He did not want to live only for himself. He wanted to help others, the promise he made. As he grew older, Saint Nicholas made a promise that would change his life forever. He promised that if he ever had the chance, he would help people quietly, without expecting anything in return. He believed that true kindness should never be done for fame. It should be done because it is the right thing to do. This promise became the foundation of everything he did. Instead of chasing wealth or power, he chose compassion. Instead of thinking about himself, he thought about those who had nothing. One of the most famous stories about Saint Nicholas is the story of the secret gifts. In a small town, there lived a poor man who had 3 daughters. He had no money, no resources, and no hope for their future. Without help, their lives were going to be filled with struggle. Nicholas heard about this family, and instead of visiting them openly, he decided to help them secretly. One night, when everyone was asleep, he placed a small bag of gold near their home. The next night, he did the same thing again. And the third time, the father discovered the truth: someone was helping them without asking for recognition. That someone was Nicholas. Section 5, a name that started to spread. Slowly, people began to hear stories about a mysterious man who helped the poor. Some believed it was only a rumor. Others believed it was a miracle. But one thing was certain: kindness was spreading because of him. The name Saint Nicholas became known not because he wanted fame, but because his actions changed lives. Children who had nothing suddenly had hope. Families who had lost everything suddenly believed in kindness again. And without realizing it, Nicholas was becoming something much bigger than a normal person. He was becoming a symbol of generosity, compassion, and love. Section 6, a man who refused to be famous. What makes the story of Saint Nicholas so powerful is not just the kindness he showed, but the way he showed it. He never wanted to be seen as a hero. He never asked people to praise him. He believed that true kindness should remain quiet. But the more he tried to stay hidden, the more people talked about him. Stories spread from one town to another. People began to wait for help, hoping that the mysterious giver would appear again. Children started to believe that someone out there truly cared about them. Years passed, and the story of Nicholas grew stronger. What started as simple acts of kindness slowly turned into a legend. People began to believe that he was more than just a man. Some believed he was chosen for a special purpose. Others believed he was a blessing sent to help those in need. And perhaps, in a way, both were true. Because the story of Saint Nicholas did not end with his life. Instead, it grew larger with time. It crossed countries, cultures, and generations, eventually becoming the story the world celebrates every Christmas. The story that continues today. Even today, millions of people celebrate Christmas without knowing the real story behind it. They see decorations, gifts, and celebrations, but the heart of Christmas is not about things. It is about kindness, generosity, and hope, the same values that Nicholas lived for. And this is only the beginning of the story. Because the real journey of Saint Nicholas is much deeper, much more emotional, and much more powerful than most people imagine. While many people today imagine Saint Nicholas as a smiling and joyful figure, the truth is very different. His life was not easy. The world around him was full of struggle, pain, and uncertainty. People were afraid of losing their homes, their families, and sometimes even their lives. Poverty was not rare, it was normal. And in such a world, kindness was not always appreciated. Many people believed that helping others was a waste of time when survival itself was so difficult. But Nicholas thought differently. He believed that the more difficult the world became, the more important kindness became. This belief made him stronger, but it also made his life more challenging. Instead of following the easy path, he chose the harder one, a life dedicated to helping people who had nothing. Section 2, The Loss That Changed Everything. One of the most emotional moments in the life of Saint Nicholas came when he was still very young. He lost the people he loved the most. The loss was sudden, painful, and deeply personal. For many people, such a tragedy would have destroyed hope completely. But for Nicholas, it became a turning point. Instead of becoming bitter, he became more compassionate. He understood what it felt like to lose everything, and that understanding changed the way he saw the world. He realized that many people around him were suffering silently, just like he had. From that moment on, he made a silent promise that he would never ignore someone who needed help. After facing so much pain, Saint Nicholas did something unexpected. Instead of trying to rebuild his life in a comfortable way, he began helping people even more. But he did not do it openly. He believed that true kindness should remain hidden. At night, when the streets were empty and the world was quiet, he would leave small gifts for poor families. Sometimes it was food. Sometimes it was money. Sometimes it was simple things that most people did not even notice, but for those families, it meant everything. Children who had no hope suddenly had something to smile about. Parents who were struggling suddenly felt relief. And slowly, the story of a mysterious helper began to spread again. People began to notice. Even though Saint Nicholas tried to stay hidden, people started to notice a pattern. Whenever someone lost hope, help appeared. Whenever a family was in trouble, something unexpected happened that made their life easier. Some people believed it was luck. Others believed it was a miracle. But a few people began to suspect the truth: someone was helping quietly. This made Nicholas uncomfortable. He never wanted attention. He never wanted people to praise him. He only wanted to make the world a little less painful. But the more he helped, the more people talked about him. His name slowly began to spread from one town to another, and his actions started to inspire others as well. The moment that made him famous. There came a moment when Saint Nicholas did something so powerful that people could no longer ignore it. In a small town, a poor family was about to lose everything. They had no food, no money, and no hope left. The father had already accepted that his children would grow up in pain and poverty. That night, Nicholas helped them secretly, just like he always did. But this time, the story spread faster than before. People were shocked that someone would help a stranger without expecting anything in return. They began to talk about him not just as a kind man, but as someone truly special. This was the moment when Nicholas stopped being just a person, he started becoming a legend. But being known for kindness was not always easy. Some people admired Saint Nicholas, but others were jealous. Some believed he was pretending. Others believed he wanted attention. There were even people who tried to stop him from helping others. Yet Nicholas did not change. He did not argue. He did not try to prove himself. He continued doing what he believed was right. And this made him stronger than those who doubted him. He understood that kindness is not always appreciated immediately, but in the long run, it always makes a difference. A symbol of hope. As time passed, the story of Saint Nicholas became something much bigger than a simple story. People began to see him as a symbol of hope. Children believed that someone cared about them. Poor families believed that kindness still existed. Even people who had lost faith in the world began to believe again. This is what made Nicholas different from other historical figures. He did not become famous because of power or wealth. He became famous because of compassion. And in a world filled with struggle, compassion was more powerful than anything else. The journey was only beginning. By this point in the story, Saint Nicholas had already changed many lives. But his journey was far from over. The biggest challenges were still ahead of him. The world was about to test his courage in ways he never expected. And the story of Christmas was about to become even more emotional, more powerful, and more unforgettable. The world around Saint Nicholas was becoming darker. Poverty was increasing, and people were losing hope. Families were struggling to survive, children were growing up without happiness, and many people believed that kindness no longer existed. In such a difficult time, even small acts of generosity felt like miracles. Nicholas understood something that most people did not: the world does not change through power, it changes through kindness. And instead of waiting for someone else to make a difference, he decided to continue helping people no matter how hard life became. The night that became a legend. There was one winter night that changed everything. The air was freezing, the streets were silent, and the town looked almost lifeless. But that night, Saint Nicholas decided to help more people than ever before. Instead of helping only one family, he helped many. Quietly, carefully, and without being seen, he left food, clothes, and small gifts for those who needed them the most. Children woke up the next morning with smiles on their faces. Parents were shocked to see help appear without warning. No one knew how it happened, but everyone felt something special. This was the night that people later connected with Christmas. Why children trusted him. One of the most powerful parts of the story of Saint Nicholas is the way children trusted him. Even though they had never seen him, they believed that someone was looking after them. And that belief made their lives better. Children started to think of him not just as a helper, but as a protector. They believed that if they were kind and honest, good things would happen. And slowly, a new tradition began, a tradition based on kindness, generosity, and hope. The story of Saint Nicholas did not stay in one town. It spread from place to place, from country to country. Travelers shared stories about a kind man who helped the poor secretly. Some people added new details to the story. Others changed parts of it. But the heart of the story remained the same: a man who helped others without expecting anything in return. As time passed, the story became more powerful. People began to celebrate kindness on a special day every year. They started to believe that helping others was the true meaning of Christmas. And slowly, the story of Nicholas became a tradition. From a man to a symbol. There are many historical figures in the world, but very few become symbols. Saint Nicholas became one of those rare people. He was no longer remembered only as a person. He became a symbol of kindness, generosity, and hope. This is the reason why even today, millions of people celebrate Christmas. They may not know the real story, but they still follow the values that Nicholas believed in. They still give gifts, they still help others, and they still believe that kindness can change the world. The emotional truth behind Christmas. Many people think Christmas is only about decorations and gifts, but the real story is much deeper. The story of Saint Nicholas teaches us that kindness is more powerful than money, more powerful than fame, and more powerful than fear. Nicholas did not become famous because he wanted to. He became famous because his actions touched people's hearts. And that is something that very few people in history have been able to do. Even though the story had already spread across many countries, the journey of Saint Nicholas was not over yet. There were still many people who needed help. There were still many children who needed hope. And Nicholas knew that his work was far from finished. It reminds us that helping others can change lives. And it reminds us that even one person can make a difference. This is why his story never disappeared. It continued to grow, to inspire, and to remind people that kindness is stronger than fear. Section 8, the final chapter was still ahead. By now, the legend of Saint Nicholas had already spread far and wide. But the most emotional part of the story was still left. The final chapter would not just explain how he became a legend, it would explain why the world never forgot him. And that chapter is even more powerful than everything before it. As the years passed, people slowly began to realize that Saint Nicholas was not just a kind man. He was someone whose actions had changed the lives of thousands of people. Families who once had nothing were now living with hope. Children who once believed that the world was cold and unfair now believed that kindness still existed. Even when Nicholas became older, he did not stop helping others. He did not change his way of life. He continued doing the same simple thing he had always done, helping people quietly. He never asked for fame, and he never tried to become important. But the more he tried to stay hidden, the more people remembered him. The day the world lost a kind heart. There came a time when the world had to say goodbye to Saint Nicholas. It was a moment filled with sadness, because people knew they were losing someone truly special. But even in that moment, something powerful happened. Instead of forgetting him, people decided to remember him in the best way possible, by continuing his kindness. Children who had grown up with his help told his story to others. Families who had been supported by him shared his story with their friends. And slowly, his life became something that could never be forgotten. The man was gone, but the story remained. How a real man became Santa Claus. Over time, the story of Saint Nicholas began to change. People added new details. Some said he traveled at night. Some said he helped only children. Others believed he brought gifts secretly during winter. Slowly, the real man became something much bigger, a legend. This is how the world eventually created the figure we now know as Santa Claus. But behind the legend, behind the red clothes, and behind the magical stories, there was still a simple truth: a real man had inspired it all. And that truth makes the story even more powerful. Many people believe Christmas is only about decorations, gifts, and celebrations. But the real meaning of Christmas comes from the life of Saint Nicholas. It is about helping others without expecting anything in return. It is about making someone smile. It is about bringing hope to people who feel forgotten. Nicholas did not try to change the world in a big way. He simply helped one person at a time. But sometimes, that is enough to change everything. Section 5, the legacy that never ended. What makes the story of Saint Nicholas so special is that it never truly ended. Even today, millions of people continue the tradition he started. Parents give gifts to their children. Families help the poor during winter. People try to make someone's day better during Christmas. In a way, Nicholas is still helping people, not because he is alive, but because his story continues to inspire kindness. Section 6, Why the World Still Believes. There is a reason why children all over the world still believe in the spirit of Christmas. It is not only because of stories or traditions. It is because people want to believe that kindness still exists. They want to believe that someone cares. And the story of Saint Nicholas gives them that hope. This is why his story has survived for centuries. It is not just a historical story. It is a story about humanity itself. If you look closely, the story of Saint Nicholas is not really about a hero. It is about a person who chose kindness when life was difficult. It is about someone who helped others even when no one was watching. It is about a man who believed that small acts of kindness could make the world better. And perhaps that is the real reason why people still remember him today. The ending that will always continue. As this story comes to an end, one thing becomes clear: the story of Saint Nicholas never truly ends. Every time someone helps another person without expecting anything in return, the story continues. Every time someone brings hope to someone else, the story continues. Every time someone chooses kindness instead of selfishness, the story continues. And that is why this is not just a story about the past. It is a story about today. It is a story about tomorrow. And it is a story that will continue for generations.